And our conversation with Tim Lambert is brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Of course, there is extra emphasis, if there can be, there is this year on September 11th, because it is the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks on America. And there is a program that will be going on in commemoration of that, as IUP will be having its commemoration ceremony, its remembrance of 3 IUP alumni lost in the World Trade Center attacks. And that ceremony will be happening, I believe, Tim, that the ceremony is on Friday, correct?
Yes, I think it starts at 11:40 in the morning.
All right, and you are going to be one of the speakers there that night. Maybe explain to folks, because I didn't give you a proper introduction, explain to folks why this is such a very important thing for you, and of course it starts with where you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning. Thanks so much for having me on today. It's great to be talking to Indiana. It's been a long time since I've been back on campus, so class of '92. It's a real honor to be able to be a speaker on Friday. So basically, my connection to Flight 93, actually, which crashed, about 56 miles from campus there, is that my family owned some of the land that was part of the crash site. And so I've managed to kind of watch the journey of that land going from a reclaimed strip mine to the site of this horrific accident in the middle of the worst terrorist attacks in our nation's history to basically becoming a cemetery and now a national memorial.
For you, of course, there is the personal connection of Shanksville. But there's also the connection with IUP and the IUP alumni who were lost, which may be a little bit muted for you since you hadn't been on campus for a while. But there's also the fact that as a nationally recognized Murrow Award-winning journalist, you did some of the most outstanding reporting on 911 and in subsequent years that there was out there. Could you take us back to the initial reports that you did and how touched you were by what was unfolding before you?
Well, thank you for the kind words. Sure. So I'll kind of start at the beginning. I was like every other journalist on September 11th, just sort of went to work and was thrust into trying to make sense of what was happening that day. And on the drive into work, I'd heard that a plane had crashed in Somerset County. And, I thought, well, my dad grew up in Shanksville. He may know somebody there that I can call and find out what's going on. And later in the day, around 4:30 in the afternoon, I kind of stopped and looked at a television up on the filing cabinet in the newsroom, and there was a reporter standing at the intersection of the Lambertsville-Shanksville Road. And that's when it occurred to me, we own land really close to that intersection. So I kind of just went about my business. I covered a prayer vigil that night, and I was living in Gettysburg at the time. So by the time I got home, it was around 1:30 in the morning, and there was an answering machine message from my father who said that he was watching the video all day, and he said, "Those are our trees." And I kind of looked at the machine like, what did he just say? So he said, what do we do? And I said, well, let's just wait and see if they'll find us. They're kind of busy right now. When they need us, they'll find us. And that came about 3 weeks later when the Somerset County coroner, Wallace Miller, called and confirmed that our land was part of the crash site. And then he invited me to come to the site and take a look at the cleanup operations there and what they were doing on my property. So I wanted to be transparent, and I said, look, I'm a journalist, just so you know, and Wally is this tremendous guy, and he just sort of paused and said, what are you going to do, report on yourself? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. So that sort of started this journey for me. I went out in October of 2001, the first weekend, and we took a tour of the property. And this was a place that had been sealed off from the public since the day of the attacks. And so this was a unique opportunity as a journalist, but it's also something that I was well aware that I was walking on hallowed ground. This was a cemetery, and I wanted to treat it with care. So we sort of just detailed, what it was like walking that site and allowing listeners to have an understanding of, debris was everywhere. Flight 93 was everywhere on the ground around us, from metal to wire to, paper coming out of the trees because there was so much mail on the plane. So that was like the first story I did, and as I sort of went there mostly as a landowner and less as a journalist. I got to know family members, and we just would have these amazing conversations while we walked the site, and we would see each other in remembrance ceremonies and meetings and things like that. And I just got a chance to really get to know a lot of these folks and form these tremendous friendships. And so through the years, we would just go to the site on some of the anniversaries, the 5-year, the 10-year, the 15, and we would just have a conversation, and then I would write a story about it. And I never really thought much about it because I was so deep into that world that I didn't realize how extraordinary these conversations might sound for people who haven't been paying that close attention to the story of Flight 93. And so I just have been really fortunate to be able to, share those stories with people so they can learn about the ones who have been left behind and the efforts they've made to make sure that their loved ones have been remembered.
Tim Lambert is our guest this morning. He will be one of the speakers at IUP's commemoration happening on Friday for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. You spent this summer doing something that, to me, would have been very, very difficult to do, even 20 years later. To you, it is such a personal connection that I really can't imagine what you went through. Tell me about the project that you did this summer, and I've seen it. It's amazing. And to you, it just must have, at the same time as picking you up, it had to tear you down a little bit, too.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It was both of those things, really. So I've been really fortunate that I worked with NPR's White House correspondent, Scott Detrow, on this project that ended up being an hour-long podcast called Sacred Ground. Now, Scott and I have worked together in the past. His first job out of college was at WITF here in Harrisburg. So we knew each other, and he called me up last fall and said, we really need to do something special for the 20th anniversary. So management here at WITF was kind enough to take me off the air. I'm the morning host, and reduce my duties as news director as well, and just allow me to focus on this project. And Scott and I just went back through the oral histories that the Park Service has collected. I reached out to a lot of the families I've met through the years. I've reached out to new family members that I hadn't met. I knew just through Facebook. And we wanted to tell the story of their journey. We wanted to talk about, we know the story of the 40 passengers and crew and what they did to stop a horrendous attack on the nation's capital. But we kind of forgot about what happened to the families afterwards. Their grief never got to be really private. It was very public. They're out at these commemoration events every year. They're interviewed every time this story comes up. So this was a chance for them to sit down and talk about what it was like for the last 20 years to really sort of, have this journey of grief and coming to terms with the loss of their loved ones. And some people talked about going all in and working on the memorial and making sure that happened and it was done the right way. Others kind of pulled back and said, it's just too difficult to even talk about today. And some family members shared some of the relics that they have that their loved ones left behind, things that were actually recovered from the crash site, like a hemp wallet from the sister of Richard Guadagna, who was a fish and wildlife officer. Just these amazing stories. So it was a real honor to go through and sort of tell a story about the site itself. As I mentioned earlier, it had that progression as nature healed, and it became this memorial. But the personal side of it was really difficult. We would do, script readings, and I would find myself choking up at different points. I never knew when it was going to come, but it just got me. And that was a reminder to me that this story is right underneath the surface for me, and any sort of thing could kind of bring those emotions out. And I probably will tell the crowd on Friday that they'll have to excuse me if I do kind of pause every once in a while because something will just catch me and I'll just have to take a second to collect myself. It's
been 20 years. I don't know how often you have been able to go back, but when and I remember years ago going back to the site when it was at first a sort of a makeshift type of memorial, and people were still scrambling to determine exactly what to do with that site. And then what it has become today, and there are areas still off limits to the public, and obviously you have had the opportunity to go to some of those areas. But both of those different sites that are on the same place, the makeshift memorial and then the more formal one that is in place now, both of them speak to us, but in different ways, I find.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the temporary memorial used to be sort of this place of you would go and you would look out into the field and you sort of wondered, where did the plane go down? And there was a fence there and it had a flag on it. So you had a general idea of the field. But it was always so quiet there. It was, people just looking out in the field and kind of thinking to themselves, what had happened, the courage shown by those passengers. And then the formal memorial now sort of brings this sense of healing a little bit. You'll look out on the field, you're eye level with the crash site now, and there's a boulder out there, a 17-ton boulder that marks where the plane met the earth at, 563 miles an hour. So this is a place now where it's solitude. It's very peaceful. You sort of reflect. And for me, I hope that people, when they look out in that field and they walk along the wall of names and they read the 40 names of the passengers and crew, that they think to themselves, could I have done what they did that day? Would I have done what they did? And, would they be able to be courageous when courage is called upon? So, yeah, it's a very powerful place. And, having the opportunity to walk down into the crash site still with family members, they're kind enough to take me down there. It's just a whole different feeling, and you just have this presence to it. I used to live in Gettysburg, and I've been to Normandy, and so I've been at these places where these massive historical events have happened, where massive death has happened, and it has that same feel to it. Something happened there, and it's important, and you kind of have the hair on your arms kind of raise up when you walk through those gates. So it's a special place.
How will people be able to see the podcast that you put together?
They could go to NPR's Politics Podcast page, and it is called Sacred Ground, and it came out last Friday, so you might have to scroll down a little bit. You can search for, the podcast Sacred Ground. It's also on our website, WITF.org as well, so I hope you get a chance to check it out, and stick around for the ending, because I think that is a little bit of a surprise for people.
Oh, it is. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work, and we appreciate your taking some time out of your morning to spend with us to tell us about it and about your coming to IUP this week. Tim, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 11.6 FM and AM 11.6 FM.